Good. Welcome everybody to another Tree Actions podcast. And joining us on this episode is none other than Mr. Rip Tompkins. Rip, it's great to see your face and have you on the show. I know this is a audio only podcast, but we do record it with some video, so it's nice to see you. And welcome to the show. Tree Actions is about people sharing their experience and growing up what I've started calling the human forest, and how trees have impacted your life, our lives. And at some point we get into a little bit how training became a part, because everyone so far that we've had on has some connection to training. And the first few people we've interviewed, Rip, your name came up quite often, and with your background in training, and welcome to the show. So I don't know, where did your connection to trees
my
start?
Journey?
Yeah, well,
journey to trees?
Yeah.
Well, it's good. It's pretty interesting. And by the way, hi, Dwayne. Hi, Tony. Nice to see you guys. It's been a while. But, geez, myself, without getting too into it, I had been gone through a period of my life where I was probably not the most productive person in the world, shall we say. I was enjoying myself a lot, doing a lot of traveling. But as a kid, I never had a job inside. I always, whatever, during summers. And then as I got to be, a teenager during the summer in school, I always worked outside, started out, working for a farmer, local farmer that worked on a golf course for a number of years, worked for some landscapers. So, I'm just one of these kids who, before they did all these tests on, your aptitude and things like that, I was definitely one of these kids who was in school most of the time lost and staring out the window, I think, because I was usually, I'd lost the gist of what the teacher was saying. But, I had been living out west and traveling around the country a lot and needed to get my act together. And I called my parents. So at this point, I'm about 23 and a half, something like that. And I called my parents and asked them if I could, at this point, they lived outside of Boston, asked them if I could come stay with them for a while I literally cleaned myself up. And, they were fine with that. And I came back east and, I knew a guy locally. He had a landscape company and he gave me a job. And, I just got into it heavily and, worked for him for a couple of years. And one of the things, we did not do tree work, so we would subcontract it from a tree company the next town over. And, but as time went on, of course, working landscaping and up in the Northeast, a lot of times the winter was plowing snow.
Right.
As time went on, though, I started talking to my boss and saying, we could do some of these small tree jobs. We ought to get a chipper. So we got a small brush chipper. And then when we would subcontract that company, we would just bring in a couple climbers, and so I was the ground guy. And I dragged brush, I fed the chippers, learned to run ropes a little. And, after a while, I started thinking, I wonder, maybe I'd like to try this tree climbing stuff. It kind of looks cool. I told my boss and he's like, hey, go for it. He was always good about that, and so I actually went to work for that company for a year or two and learned to climb. And it didn't take long till I realized that this was really what I wanted to and should be doing.
Wow.
Admittedly, back then, of course, very old school. This is, probably 1985, 86, around there. And, I learned to climb, but at the same time, it was dicey a lot. I mean, free climbing was the norm and, lanyard, at any rate. But I, after a while, my boss actually had, he is going through some problems with his marriage and doing too many drugs. And I was like, this is the last thing I need to be near again. And, so at that point, I actually went back to work for my old boss. And he said, well, listen, I don't have tree work all the time, but I'll pay you this rate if you're doing landscaping, and I'll pay you, practically twice as much if you're climbing for me. And so I was like, yeah, okay. And that was good, but it just didn't take long till I realized I wanted to climb all the time. I didn't really want to do, the stonework, the masonry, all that other stuff.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how it started. And then I started my own small tree company in Weston, Massachusetts. That would have been about 1987. And, you know, that's where things
Rip.
started. I mean, I can keep going, but, or you
Well,
want
no,
to.
it's good. Rip, I'm curious what you remember. Like, what was your first, as far as climbing equipment goes, like if you compare it, obviously to now, it'd be quite different. But what was your first harness or your first rope or not you use or
So,
anything?
yeah, my first, basically, the funny thing was, so I was fortunate enough by the time I started, synthetic climbing lines were, in use. So I didn't have to climb on 3-strand manila. And by then, Samson had come out with Arborplex and New England had come out with Safety Blue. And, my boss said, well, look, here's one of each. Try it. Whichever one you like, you can use. And of course, I picked the Safety Blue. I liked it more, but and I had an old, what I'd call a suicide saddle, an old safety test,
Yeah.
No leg straps, butt strap, 2 D-rings, just totally very, very rudimentary. And, you'd have a big, one of those monster hand saws and, a really crappy lanyard and that was about it. So yeah, it was not very fancy back then.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of us can relate to that for sure.
Yeah.
So, how would you, did training like start into it for you? Like, where did it, and I know it's been a big part of your career in life, but how did that all get started for you?
Well, let's see. So, probably one of the most important things was, as I got involved working for initially Lincoln Tree Service, but then, I started Barkbusters, was I got involved with the Massachusetts Arborist Association, which was an old association. They had their own certification program long before ISA did. And, they would have dinner meetings and educational opportunities because, of course, I had never gone to school for arboriculture. And, that's where I started learning more and, get to meet other guys. And I became a Massachusetts certified arborist. And, every year, the best event they held every year was our Arbor Day event, which, was usually the last Saturday. I think they do it now on Friday, but the last Saturday of April. And, anywhere from 200 to 300 guys from different companies from around the, generally Eastern Mass would get together and do free work at some needy site, usually a park or a zoo or one of those things. And of course, this is stuff that, nowadays, obviously, I mean, come on, we're going to talk and, hundreds of thousands of people could listen to it. Back then, of course, there was no internet, there were no cell phones. Everything was word of mouth. Or through the grapevine. So, really, we were very limited to what we could learn to the people we worked with. And that could be good or bad, right? you know how it is. You hear a lot of guys, well, this guy's got 40 years of experience. It's like, well, that doesn't mean it's all good experience, does it? And, so, and that's the thing. I mean, the guys I learned with, from were generally, they were trying to be safe. But again, safety wasn't as important, but the thing I loved about the Arbor Day event was I got to see other guys climb and, rub elbows with other guys from other companies. And, so that was a kind of a cool thing. And one year, so this must be like 1989, maybe 1990, I had done my job in the morning and came down and, after you're done working, I could, wander around and look at other guys climb. And I walked to the other side of the park and I realized that there was this tree climbing competition going on. So it's like, what's this? I didn't even know they existed, And that was when I first, A, met Ken Palmer, but B, I saw that there was climbing competitions and it was like, oh yeah, you can enter. And so I thought, well, what the heck? Next year I'll come give it a try. And so in those days, the New England chapter of ISA did their tree climbing competition in conjunction with the MAA's Arbor Day. And so, it was kind of cool. At any rate, I know I'm making this long-winded, but it's kind of, this is how it all kind of came around to. It was getting introduced to the climbing competitions. And of course, I went back home and I, because I watched a little bit of the end of the competition. I went back home and thought, well, I can practice next year a little bit. I taught myself to footlock. I had never footlocked. I'd never even really seen it. And, things like throw line while we had throw line, didn't really understand the real way it could be used to its maximum potential.
Right.
But, so I came back that next year and as I tell people, I said, I didn't win the event. I think I actually came third, which was amazing. But I said I was a winner because of the things I saw that day and how other guys climbed and other guys, obviously Ken had already won the, he won it that year. So he hadn't won it yet, but he had been competing in the international or the national, the North American in those days, I'd say really, because it was US and Canada. But, and then there was some other good climbers and, so I thought, well, you know what, I learned some good stuff today. I'm going to go back and practice, and really, next year. And actually, so that was 1991. Ken went on to win that year. But then the next year in 92, back at the New Englands, I came and competed and I beat him. And of course, it is. Ken will tell you, well, I already had an invite back to the, because I was the former champion. But it's like anybody who knows Ken doesn't come to compete and not win. So that didn't really hold a lot of water to me afterwards. But and then I went, went to the international and so that I got involved in the competition. That's when I met Bob Weber. And, at this point, Bob Weber and he had won already and he won his second time in 92. And, of course, Ken would win a couple more. But those guys started, being asked to do, seminars, I'm going to call them. Really, I used to call it the wow effect show. It was more coming in and do big rigging stuff and, some showing off some climbing things. And of course, this is really when, Bob had some rock climbing experience, rock climbing and assist climbing background. So he really started bringing in a little bit of this equipment because I remember the first time I saw him use the Gibbs Ascender for a lanyard. It was like, oh my God. You got one of those? I bought one from him that day because I've been using the old adjustable prusik thing, which is horrific, gets gummed. It was horrible. And, but little things like that were kind of the beginning of this entry into, newer equipment from high angle rescue and rock climbing and things like that into our industry. And, of course, the use of the prusik loop for fall protection and, any other number of things. And so, that's kind of how, I started meeting those guys. And again, those guys were initially doing, really, I would call it more seminar format, large groups, which is, it's a good way to expose a lot of people to a lot of things. But, all along we, and really it was kind of the three of us there for a while. All along, we really kind of wanted to try to get, people out of the work day and do some real hands-on training. Because of course, historically, I think, training in our industry was always on the job training, which, sounds good, but come on, let's face it. Most of the time it's like, okay, we're getting the job done. And oh, by the way, if you can learn a little bit along the way, that's a great thing, which could be, but it, most company owners weren't going to say, all right, we're going to take the day off today and, not produce and not make money. You're going to go out and get trained. I mean, it just really wasn't done. And that was the concept that, we kind of all could see because of course we could see there was, high risk in the work we're doing. And, and of course these guys had, especially I would say Bob, especially, but Ken, had a lot of, again, newer techniques, newer equipment was starting to, become integrated into our industry. Yeah. And so I kind of tagged along initially, and of course, not long thereafter, there was really the formation of Arbor Master, which was in 1995. And initially Bob was one of the three of us were going to do it together. And then we got connected through Steve Wood at Husqvarna with Tim Ard and, Tim and Soren a little bit, but, Tim was more involved really from that aspect. And, but, it didn't take long before Bob was like, yeah, you know what? I don't want to do all this traveling. And, And, Bob is a really smart guy, very knowledgeable, as you guys know, but I've never seen any guy, somebody who beat himself up more to prepare for a presentation. I mean, the poor guy would stay up all night long in the hotel room he'd have slides just covering all the beds and the floors and everything, preparing. And it's like, dude, you need to get some sleep, and, you're going to be on stage tomorrow. But, obviously very, very bright guy. But anyway, that's how it all got started.
Yeah. And Rip, really, when you think about it, I'm sure you're well aware of this, but, you, the three of you, and you were a major part of it, as Bob, kind of moved on to pursue his own thing and, unaware of what, the growth that Arbormaster would experience. And you were there for that whole ride. And it really, the revolution, if you will, the arboriculture revolution, that time frame, I don't know, I would say 95, 97 till, I don't know where I would put it till like about 05 was like probably one of the most revolutionary time frames in arboriculture that still exists today. And what was it like from your perspective? I mean, you were right. You were so much a part of that. It's ridiculous. Like you've seen a lot, like from homemade stuff to it getting manufactured, built to, and coming up with all of that and the impact that's had on the industry. Like, how do you process all that as being so close to that?
Well, you know what, Dwayne, I look at it this way. I was a really lucky guy. I got to meet a lot of knowledgeable people, getting able to go over to Europe and compete there, but also rub elbows with some of those guys. And you had Francois Dessen and Frédéric Mattès, and I mean, they were making, started out, with Comet and, making harnesses. And of course, Francois had a rock climbing background. So, the introduction of even newer and different climbing hitches. I mean, come on, we all grew up with some variation of the taut line hitch. I mean, I started with I don't even, it was just like, we called it a speed knot, it's a 1/2. And, which, probably wouldn't even be allowed today, but it worked. And I just think back that, I've been lucky. I've met a lot of knowledgeable people and, I've been fortunate to learn from them. And that's kind of what made me feel good about doing the training. Because I was like, you know what, if I can give back and I can help somebody else. And of course, I had no formal training in as far as how to be an instructor. I didn't go to school for that. I didn't know. I just tried to do the best I could and tried to, I don't know. I learned from people like Ken and Tim Ard, a number of things, but it's interesting. You learn and you watch other people do things. And what I really wanted to do is I wanted to kind of create my own technique to teach, which I tried to do, and again, I had no training in how to do it. And so I might not pass some of your courses as far as the training thing, but I felt I could connect to people. So, that felt like a good thing. I don't know. I always felt like because I didn't realize like I was anybody special. I just felt like, I'm one of the guys who's been lucky and hey, if I can share that with others, then that's a good thing. And, so yeah, it was amazing to see all this change. I mean, come on, it's happening so fast. And because as you're in one place and you're seeing people a lot of people are incorporating new equipment and techniques into their climbing kit. And then you go somewhere else and it's like, these guys have seen none of this. So it's like, kids at the candy store or on Christmas morning, it's like, oh my gosh. And, so of course that was always nice when you could, expose people and you could see how, they could see how it could change the way they worked. And of course, I think as you guys, both of you have been involved in this, agree is like, as I said, there's a lot of potential risk in the work we do. And so if we could get people to, realize that the most important thing they do each day is go home at the end of the day. And, then you felt like you were doing something good. I'm sure this happened. Yeah.
I always think of I learned the acronym C, as part of my time with Arbormaster and which I, look back on with great fondness and it was a valuable. Well, and meeting you was very positive for me. But the C acronym, that I still use it often today.
Sure.
It's
Absolutely.
what you're kind of talking about, right?
Yep.
Do you know where that, like, how that was conceived exactly? Like, I never heard a whole story of where that came from.
Yeah. Well, again, that was somehow that came up, with probably with Bob and Ken and I, and Bob, I think Bob may have been the first one about hope too. That may be, one of his ideas of the hazards, obstacles, planning, equipment thing. But I think, somehow there was a brainstorm thing going on with all of us. I honestly, I don't remember. I can't remember that, hey, it happened this day, but I'm with you. I still refer to that all the time because it's still, I mean, come on, these days, right? The newest, latest gear. I mean, it's just off the charts. It's,
Yeah.
but here again, it's like, I don't know. I always used to say, it's good to learn to drive a VW before you get it behind the wheel of a Porsche. And, but a lot of these kids these days, they wouldn't know what to do in a VW. I mean, again, they start out with, a fancy equipment, fancy devices. I mean, again, what happens if they didn't have that in the tree? They'd be kind of lost. And I still think, and that was obviously why a lot of our premise was that, to build a good, strong foundation, you need to start kind of with the more basic stuff and then build on it. And
right. Rip, that's an interesting comment. It's been a common theme, and everyone we've had on the show so far has commented about that, and about the, we've made reference to the arboriculture revolution of the 90s or late 90s into the early 2000s, but it seems to have gone into a whole nother realm of almost what's newest and shiniest just for the change for the sake of change, rather than, and we agree totally. And, I don't know if it's always just the old guys on the soapbox here, but it's like, guys that don't even know MRS from SRS, that SRS is all there is. And, it's got to be the newest termination, and canopy, basal anchors, all there, it just, how is, how do you explain that, or try to explain to someone getting into it the significance of, like you're saying, the basics? Is it safer? Is it easier? Is it more efficient?
Right.
Using that criteria in your development of integrating new things. How do you, I guess, explain or justify that to someone that new in the industry? It's a question, right, Tony, you and I ask often.
Right. No, and you're right, because it's so easy that everybody's blinded by, the newest, latest gizmos and gadgets. And
But how come, Rip? Why is that, do you think? What's happening?
Well, I guess it has to do with somewhat maybe of our just where our society's gone. I mean, come on. Now look at here again. I mean, I don't know, the internet. Well, what half the guys want to become famous because they're on YouTube or something like that. So anyway, I don't know. It's a hard one to really grasp, but I just try to go back to my own experiences and say, hey, all that stuff's great. But, and here again, you mentioned C again, because a lot of this stuff that's going on now doesn't really jibe with safer, easier, more efficient. Oh yeah, maybe more efficient. But, and do you really know, how to use this thing properly? I mean, you see a lot of guys, they've got all this equipment and they don't even really know what to do with it. So yeah, I mean, and I don't know. I try to use my own experiences, and it's like the whole thing about, oh man, you use MRS? That's old school. It's like, well, okay, if that's how you call it, that's fine. But you know what? What I use is what I think is the best, system for each given situation. And, in a lot of cases, yes, working on a stationary rope is great, but I'm in my mid 60s. I'm not doing 40-foot limb walks way down out on a limb and hauling myself back in, on a stationary rope, because I don't find it as efficient.
Exactly.
So, to me, it's like when people ask me what I use, I say, hey, I use a combination. I mean, I can't remember the last time other than, a tree where you could climb the limbs from the ground that I didn't go up on a stationary rope. But more often than not, I go up on that, change over to a moving rope. Most of the time I'll use a combination. Sometimes I'll have 2 stationary ropes and a moving rope in a big tree. So, using a combination of things is just what I feel is the best, but also just trying to keep the safety thing, thinking about that, because as you know, I mean, there's a lot of potential newer risks with, setting lines, especially doing base anchors and, we're trusting tree limbs that, we don't know what the strength of them is. As you know, this has been one of our, big issues. It's not like we're climbing on a building that's been specified by engineers to be of a certain strength and this and that. We're relying on our doing a good inspection or as best as we can and our knowledge of different trees and their species. And, and I mean, more and more, right? We're working in trees that are nasty. And, I mentioned before, I said, there's a lot of potential risk in the work we do.
Yeah.
The big difference, as you know, is, how do you want to go about doing your work? You want to take additional risk because of the way you work, or do you want to work safely? And, I'm still rooting for, I want to go home at the end of the day. And so if I can share that with people and make it, impress that upon them, that's the best I can do. I was going to mention earlier, but I'm sure this happens to you, and especially now we haven't had a lot of shows for a couple of years with COVID and everything. But, you go to some of these shows and my gosh, guys walk up to you. You don't remember me, but 27 years ago in Australia, you were, or whatever. It's like, but it makes you feel good, right? When guys are like, you made an impact on me. And so, I'm like that, and that's really what it's all about. As I said, it kind of comes back to me. I always felt like, it's like with the climbing competition. I don't know, I was lucky. I won one year. I didn't need to win anymore. I didn't need to prove anything to anybody else. I was fortunate. Some of the things, the doors that opened for me. And, so it's like, I wanted to give back. And so, for better or for worse, I'm still doing this. But I love it.
I can't think of anyone, there's not a lot that have given as much as you and that have continued to do so. Your dedication. I just want to say, I've always admired your dedication to not just the industry, but the people in the industry, not just the trees, but the tree people. And you're a giant in the human forest as far as I'm concerned. And not just like stroking you here, like you continue to give of your time, of your resources for the betterment of others. And, there's always a selfish aspect in what we do. I mean, I know you love it too. So it's not like you're out there hating what you're doing and it's some labor that you have to fulfill. Like you're getting joy from it. And that is, I think, what's evident. And it's something that, how do you feel that trees, and being a tree person as you have been a large part of your life, how has being
all right, I'll cut to the chase, Dwayne. Trees saved my life. In a lot of ways, trees saved my life. As I said, I mean, I didn't really have a lot of purpose for a long time. And, when I found trees, I was like, I realized, all right, I need to put this part of my life in the rearview mirror. And like you said, I mean, I don't know. I just feel lucky. We go to work every day. We're doing something we love. I mean, there's not a lot of people who can say that. Excuse me. I mean, there's a lot of people who slog through work. They may make boatloads of money, but they're not happy going to work. I mean, I can't. It's hard. You guys are lucky. I'm sitting in my office for an hour and whatever it is going to be today. That doesn't happen often because usually I'm looking out the window going, I think there's something I could be doing out there that would be better than sitting in here. I'm looking here. I've got people writing me texts and emails saying, oh yeah, the work you did is great, but can you send me a bill? 'Cause I'm so bad about billing. But I feel blessed to have found trees, and obviously the people we've met, Alex Shigo, others,
Yeah.
huge, a lot of the giants of our industry. And as I say, I mean, I didn't go to school for any of this. Looking back, I wish I had known earlier, because I would have loved to have gone to UMass. Would have been a great experience, but
Right.
it wasn't to be. I mean, but getting to go in different conferences, the people we meet, and that's been a great experience. And and like I said, I've had been very fortunate.
Well, Rip, you've been part of the training industry for a
Yeah,
large part of your career, and the traveling. I'm well aware of it. I've done a lot of it myself, but and I feel very similarly blessed and fortunate and lucky, to be on committees and to rub elbows with, Shigo, Kim Coders, with Gilman, with you name it, right? There,
yeah,
Don Blair, with you, with Ken, with everybody brought an element, a different view, a perspective. And if you have ears to hear and you're open to learn and listen, which I've always seen in you,
yeah,
your education has been ongoing and it's never ended. You don't have to go to school to get that. And it's evident in your, your humility, I think would be the word to describe it, aware of ourselves, I think is one way that humility
mm,
is described. But, you've said a couple times that trees saved your life, and I don't want to get too personal, but I just like that's a pretty major statement. Like, in what way would you say that it happened? Like, how did that? Was it an inspiration? Was it like? Is there a way that you could define how they saved your life?
well, I guess I kind of go back to the somewhat I'm going to call it destructive lifestyle I had
Okay.
before I decide I need to clean my act up. And I don't need to get into specifics,
Yeah.
but
No. Absolutely not.
while I
Yeah.
was traveling around predominantly with the Grateful Dead, and partying way too much, and I was right on the edge. I was
Yeah.
living in the dumps in San Francisco, in these just scungy hotels, and I could have very easily gone down over that cliff. I have a lot
Yeah.
of guys who were my friends. They're long gone,
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and so I guess it was that, because it's like anybody, whether if you have a drinking problem or a drug problem, et cetera, you may try to clean yourself up, but it's very easy to go back, to
Yeah.
fall back
Yeah.
into bad ways. And so when I say that it saved my life, it was just that, I found something that I could really sink my teeth into. And because it's funny. Again, I wasn't doing any real labor work, but then when I went to work for this guy, I couldn't. If he had let me work every day of the week, I would have. I mean, 7 days. I just got into it, and and so I think that's really kind of what I'm meaning is that I found some purpose in my life.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
while I wouldn't give up what I had done before, I mean, I have some of the experiences again. That's a for another day, another time. Some of the stories, some of the people I met and hung out with, uh, pretty amazing. But again, I was wrecking myself. So that's kind of
Yeah.
what I might mean by that is just that
I
I
get
found
it.
that again, not only could provide a living, but I was enjoying doing, and of course being outside. And I mean, come on, probably when I was a kid, although I noticed trees, I mean, coming now, I have to be we have to be careful, right? Driving is like, I got to keep my eyes on the road, because half the time, you look at,
Yeah.
oh man, that looks like a great, you know, very easy to, but,
Yeah. Anybody that's an artist knows what you're
it's,
talking about for sure.
I mean, being able to, again, being able to go out west and climb sequoias and redwoods that I've been fortunate to get to do a lot of. It's,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's just, off the
Well, Rip,
charts.
I appreciate your honesty and your vulnerability, because it's not easy. And I'm well aware, or no stranger to the journey of recovery, and I'm well on my way to a new chapter for my life too. But you bring up it I think we all are aware, and I don't know how much it does get talked about, and I don't want to make this about that part of the industry. But, you've mentioned it a couple of times. We all know that it's a very dangerous, potential, a lot of risks. There is a lot of fatality, and there is that side to it that, we haven't, we've brought some awareness to, and, Pete's definitely brought awareness to that the death danger part. But there's another side to it that we don't want to think about. I think that doesn't necessarily get as much attention, and maybe we haven't gone here before in this podcast, but I think it's fair to say arborists have addictive personalities, and when we can channel that into something positive and strong, and the power that physical labor has on our mental health and what that does to, and you can channel your energies and focus into an addiction that's positive, and I think, I think for me, it's something that's becoming something that maybe, I don't know how it should be brought up, but maybe I'm curious what your thoughts would be on that, as far as the inspiration that maybe some of us could be in our later years to the next generation of that. Don referenced it as well a little bit, and he said these young kids aren't just addicted to SRS and shiny gear. I think they're addicted to some other things too. And what is is there an opportunity in the industry to address that, or does it get addressed enough, do you think?
Yeah, I'm not sure. It's a good question. Obviously I think of, you probably get asked this all the time about, are climbers a dying breed, right? I mean, with all the new equipment, obviously there's still work for climbers out there, but as you know, I mean, finding good help is right. All the travels we've done is probably the number one thing we've heard from people. It's hard to find good help. And I mean, at least in the US here, I mean, a lot of people mumble and grumble, we got all these Hispanics working here. It's like, well, you know what? Well, there's a lot of, I hate to say this, but there's a lot of young white kids who don't want to work hard. They don't, maybe they've been very fortunate and they've grown up with, things that not all of us had growing up. But, I think there's obviously a lot of good opportunities for kids who aren't going to go the book route or whatever, but it's a lot of them just don't want to put in the sweat that it takes to be good, which I think is a shame. I'd like to think that we can, continue to try to set a good example. I mean, because you brought up, as we've said, there is a lot of risk in the industry. And, we'd like to think we've done made an impact on people. And I know we have. At the same time, we can continue to look at the statistics, and it's demoralizing sometimes, is it? Because you think, oh my gosh, there's still way too many people out there getting hurt and getting killed and, just again, taking way too much risk. Yeah. And that's a hard one. A lot of the times you think, man, I know we're making or we've made some difference, but why does it seem like we're just swimming against the tide? And it's a hard one. So, I guess back to your question, I hope we can continue to, as I keep saying, I just keep trying to tell people back to my own, the way I, what I've learned, what way I am, and that, this is working for me, and that, again, don't take any unnecessary risks if you don't have to. There's nothing wrong with saying, you know what, I don't feel safe climbing this tree. Yeah. Unfortunately, as we know, there's usually always somebody out there who will, and they'll take that additional risk, and it's just a shame because there are plenty of trees that shouldn't be climbed, and so I don't know. It's a challenge, though. It really is.
Yeah. Yeah, Rip, that theme of like your story of tree work basically saving you and saving your life from direction. I hear that all the time. From many people. There's something about the industry, I think, that draws that type of person to it, or when that person stumbles into it, because typically they fall into it. Like, it didn't me too. And I know even from my own story, it's like, well, I didn't have addiction problems or anything when I got out of the military. What I needed was a tribe. I needed a community. Yeah. And I found that in arboriculture. and I don't know if there's any other industry that has such a culture that where it's so closely knit. I mean, they're very small circles in arboriculture for being a small to medium sized industry.
Right.
And,
right.
and that ability, but I see that again and again. And there's something about tree work. I think part of it is the physical labor of it. It's hard to do anything else after 6 o'clock when you've just worked your ass off all day. And when you're falling asleep in mashed potatoes, there's only so many beers you can drink, it's just the way it goes. I think there's that of it. I think just, as I get a little older, I start to think, what are the healing powers of trees? And, there's just something about working on something like that you really, really start to appreciate and the good you can do with it. And I find it a little disconcerting, like the big social media craze, if you get on Instagram, all you see is guys taking down trees. It's like arboriculture is so much more than that.
As you were saying this, I was just thinking about how, if I never took down another tree, I'd be fine.
I say that all the time.
Best things is, doing some nice work on a tree and being able to drive by it all the time. And, like this guy who sent me the text yesterday, he was like, oh yeah, we've had a bunch of storms and gosh, not one limb came out of the tree or whatever. You did such a great job. And it's like, boom, right there. And like kind of to your point of, there's, I think, a reciprocal thing, we're doing something good for the trees, but it's also giving something back to us. At least I feel it is.
I do believe. I mean, years ago when I was younger, I would call it a pre-climb inspection. Now I walk up and ask permission.
Yeah.
And when the tree says no, you look up there and go, man, I ain't climbing that thing. That's the tree saying no.
No, you're absolutely
but there is definitely, and I think I've been around long enough and have talked to enough people in my own stories, my own experiences. There's more to it than just coincidence. There's something about the career of arboriculture when you work at it for a certain amount of time and stick with it for a certain amount of time that is healing. And I think people fall into it, and they find that healing power. And I really don't know I'm pretty sure I've never run into anybody who said, yeah, I got that factory job and man, that was the best thing ever. I changed my life. I don't run into that very often.
No, you're absolutely right. And at the same time, I think there's a lot of people who do tree work who maybe haven't gotten to the point where we have, who aren't, it's a job, to a lot of people. But I think there is a core about, like you talk about the tribe, and maybe that's what it is we've kind of got attracted to other people like us. We like to hang around with them because we all kind of have a lot of those similar feelings and similar experiences it is special.
Yeah. I mean, how many times you mentioned you do tree work for a living and there's always somebody in crowd. Oh yeah, I used to do tree work. Right? Oh yeah, I used to do brain surgery. I don't But it is definitely a common, and you're right. There's people that get into it and it's just a paycheck, but I find that they don't tend to, too hard of a dollar to stick around long. And I've always found it amazing. Like there's amazing that, you'd never start a tree company to make money. Sure, you can earn a living and make money doing the work. That's fine. And you can raise a family. And I've done that. You've done that. Dwayne's done that. But if you're looking to get rich, man, there's far easier dollars.
Oh yeah.
It's like, you got to love this. And that's why, I just find it, sometimes that's how you can separate the wheat from the chaff. Sometimes it's like when the guy comes to you and he's only concerned about his paycheck, it's like, I tell you what, maybe this isn't your line of work. You're just going to get hurt.
Yeah. And it isn't, it isn't just that it's not easy or, there's easier ways to make money, I suppose. But, when that whole saying, when you love what you do, you don't work a day in your life. And I think, not necessarily everybody's going to fall in love with the trees like we have, or many of the people we know have, but there certainly seems to be, I don't know if you guys have noticed, but you'll know within a short order of a guy starting in a bit company, we'd hire a guy and it's either he's going to be there or he's not. And most guys, when they, we'd call it getting bit by the tree bug or whatever, they end up, it gets you for life, and we all know people that's happened to. Of course, we're some of them, but it's not for everybody, and everyone has their own thing too. And that's okay. But even though there might be easier, better ways, and we say, well, it's not the easiest way to make a living, but man, what a great way to make a living when you fall in love with it, with anything really, right? And we're certainly in that camp. And, I'm very grateful for, like all of us, falling into it completely by accident. Like I know, if I think to my journey of how I got into trees, it's just bizarre. It must have been meant to
Yeah.
be,
Right. Right. Well, I didn't get, I guess I'll have to listen to your podcast, right? You guys talk about that stuff.
Yeah.
How you guys came into it or things like that. I mean,
Yeah.
I know
Guilt
you don't
and
need
shame.
to take up all this time, but I'm ready to listen. But no, it
is fun, and I find too, when you get back to training, that I find the people that make the best trainers in this industry are the people that fell into it and were saved by it, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
Right? That, changed them somehow fundamentally, because then it does become that giving back. And I mean, Rip, you were in my training career, you were instrumental in instilling that attitude in me, that it was, I think I attended a Arbor Master training course, would have been 96 or 97, Reston, Virginia, with Keith Kanzer. Remember down there? Went down for that.
I remember it very well.
Yeah. And that's where I started, and then moving up through there. But it was always of course, you go to the training course, paid a training course, whatever. That was my first formal training, in arboriculture. But the unwritten thing was always, look, you guys would share with me everything you had, and eventually it would be my time to give it back. And you wouldn't know, nobody could tell you when that time was. You would just know.
Right.
And that was very prevalent in my first, 15, 18 years with the tree climbing competition at the international level. Is just like, you get a job by hanging out long enough,
right.
And then they either get tired of you and ask you not to come back, or they give you a job. And then the idea was that and then you would eventually get the opportunity to pass that back on. And I mean, through that course at Arbor Master, that's when I met you. And then I volunteered for my first ITCC. It was in Baltimore in 2000. Nice. And because I knew you and Ken, I'm like, I'm just showing up. I asked my brother, I was working with my brother, I said, hey, can I just take the Friday or something off? He's like, sure, I'll even pay you. I'm like, whoa, win-win.
Yeah, okay.
Right. So I drove 2 hours down to Baltimore. I'm like, hey, Rip, here I am. And you're like, oh, hey, it's Tony. And I don't know. I think Peter and I ended up deadwooding some trees somewhere or something. Yeah. And it was just, but you can draw a straight line from that to, how my career went, how that path went.
Yeah. Well, and I appreciate people like yourself who've given back. That's always one of my things. I remember for a long time there, when I had the podium at the international or whatever, I was always trying to, jab that little stick at some of those climbers who are climbing. And I was like, just remember all these guys who are out there putting this thing on for you, when your days are over, give back. So, many of us have, and that's a good thing. We also know some who probably could have given back more than, but that's okay. Whatever. Yeah. We don't need to go there. But it's well, and I appreciate that. I appreciate the people who come out and, are still, giving of their time.
Absolutely.
It's a good thing. It's just, something kind of what goes around comes around. And, even if you didn't, as I said, it was like my first competition. I didn't win, but I was a winner just because of the things I learned, the people I met. And, I always try to keep telling that to younger climbers who are saying, they want to compete. It's like, compete, but enjoy yourself. You're going to learn something. You're going to make some new friends. So, even if you don't win, just don't go home with your head hanging. Yeah. Try to make it into a positive thing.
Yeah. We haven't had a lot of discussions about the tree climbing competition. I'm curious, Rip, how, the competition, obviously was a part of it's still, before we started the talk, you're head judge of the Europeans, or one of the, I think the European championships. You said, you're still,
it's hard to find a replacement.
You're still out there giving back, and how has the competition played a role in the development in the industry, and where's that headed? Do you think? Where are we at with the way things are going with the comps and stuff? Yeah.
Well, I think it's safe to say that the comps have obviously been a major driver of innovation in the industry. Yeah. I mean, without a doubt. Even back before all the fanciest stuff, everybody, back when you're competing a long time, everybody's looking for a little edge and, try out this or that. And, so I think that's been a major driver, in a lot of the new equipment, and techniques. Guys are, using that as a driving force. The competition, I think it's been great. You know, could it use some sprucing up? Probably. You know, it just seems to be a hard, and it's a hard thing to do, to find committed people who will put in a lot of time. It's been, you know, that's the thing. I don't particularly need to be the head judge at the Euros. I'd like to just go help out. But the problem is, it's finding somebody who's willing to take over that.
Right.
And it's not been easy over there. I mean, we get plenty of people come and help out, but you know, to do that, it's been a challenge. But yeah, I mean, you know, I no doubt. Again, the climbing competition opened up a lot of doors for me. You know, not only because of the initial people I met, but obviously, you know, having some successes that opened some doors, and it's I think it's generally been a good thing. It's you know, it's not perfect. You know, it could probably, I don't know. It's hard. I'm torn as to whether, you know, changing it totally or changing some of the events. It's just,
Yeah.
You know, I mean, yeah, I don't know. That's a bit of a tough one.
Well, we've had a couple of times we've asked what, you know, where's the industry at, or what would you see as a need out there in the industry at this point? Like, if there's so many new things, and Tony's referenced in the past, you know, innovation in the past, it's been our observation, and I agree with Tony that it's always solved the problem. You know, the footlock press hook solved the problem. We didn't have to free climb the rope. It protected us from a fall, as you mentioned. What's a problem that needs solving that hasn't been invented yet out there in the industry, would you think, Rip?
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, you know, I kind of keep coming back. I don't know. I obviously haven't put a lot of thought into this. I mean,
we don't either. It's okay.
One problem we haven't solved is how to freaking get guys not to, you know, do dumb things. I hate to say it that way, but a lot of times that's what it is. It's like guys, you know, they're just
young and brazen. Is it a lack of understanding? Is it ignorance? Like, what do you think fuels that?
It's probably a combination of a bunch of things, because some of it is young and brazen, but also a lot of it is older and complacent, right? Been doing this for a long time, and you know how it is. I mean, it's like I used to talk about, you know, those shortcuts, and it's like, you don't need to impress me. You need to impress yourself. You need to, you can tell all the people you want that I do this, I do that, but you know within your heart, when you're out there and you're working, are you doing things as safe as you could? Or are you taking those little shortcuts? You know, it's like the one-handed cutting. You know, you guys do it, and they do it, and they get away with it, and they get away with it. Then maybe one day they don't. Yep. Or, you know, back in the early days for me, it was always, you know, like unclipping your lanyard up in the tree.
Yeah.
I mean, come on, did that all the time. And it's like, but now I have to say, I'm ultra careful. Yeah. I've actually changed to climbing with two you know, I had the one long lanyard where I could use the back end.
Yeah.
If I needed, you know, for the secondary, because so often I'll use my lanyard as a second short climbing line, you know, center point attachment, let it out. But, you know, then you get out on a limb and it's like, you know, you'd like to have that additional security so you could, you know, take the back end of your lanyard. But the problem with that is putting it back away was always such a pain. So, you know, I've actually taken to climbing with two, you know, so I've got two, both out of velocity. One's orange, one's blue, you know, and I've got one that's probably about 16, 17 feet, maybe a little longer. And then one that's about 7 or 8, you know, just a nice shorty. Yeah. But I find myself double lanyarding in sometimes when I'm changing over I don't know. It's just, you know, I'm just trying to be conscious of, because as we know, it only takes once, you know. Mm-hmm. And, you know, one little misstep. And I don't know, you know, that's obviously, I didn't mean to be mean by saying, you know, guys do dumb stuff, but it seems like, well, again, it comes down to risk and how much do you want to take? And it's hard to get that across to a lot of guys, you know, and I think this is where you see companies that are really good is, you know, they'll start from the top down with this culture of you don't have to work too fast to get the job done. you'll get it done in the time you do. That's what's most important. Because, we've all seen or heard or worked under, foremen who are like, come on, guys, we got to get going. It's like, that's just a recipe for disaster. Yeah. You hate to say it, but I think there's still plenty of that out there.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head, Rip. It's, I guess the term company culture or the culture or what's being, the video's got to match the audio. And, there's a lot of, one of the things that really picks my butt, and I don't know if you relate to this or not, but there's, in training we do it this way, but then there's the real world of how it's done.
Yeah.
And it's like, what the hell is that supposed to mean?
Well, always one of the most, the things that, again, pick your butt, whatever, piss me off a lot is, again, these guys who stand up there, they say one thing, and then you watch them work. Yeah. And it's like, I always used to be like, dude, what you do is a lot more important than what you say to these guys. Yeah. Because you say this, and then you go up there and you do that, and they see it. It's like, well, you might as well have wasted that time, because the guys are like, well, what the hell? This is how he climbs. Exactly. Why should I do it that way?
And I think that's a big part of what's wrong. I think there's somehow the culture, there's a prevalence to that. And I think maybe people don't appreciate or understand the power of influence that they have, not just within their circle or within the close people they work with, but how that pervades, and it still is somewhat prevalent in the industry. And it's this dark culture that everyone, those guys are trainers and that's how they like to do things. But look, this is what we, and I don't think it's true, because they're not everybody's like that. And the companies that you're referencing, there are companies that support that culture and do quite well and are, leading edge.
Absolutely. Right? You notice them, they retain employees for a long time, and, guys are happy there and guys want to go work there. But, I think one of the problems is like you mentioned, is this social media culture has just exasperated it. I mean, come on. Everybody wants to be a star on YouTube, and you look at half the stuff that's out there, and like you say, guys are having an influence, whether they want to or not, or it's intended or unintended. But a lot of it is just negative. I look at some of the stuff guys are doing, and I don't, believe me, I spend almost no time. But I do admit I do a little bit of Instagram. Only, I'll send a picture here or there, and just again try to still send the message of working safely, but. I mean, so of course, sometimes I'm sitting up having a coffee at 4:30 in the morning, and, I'm up by myself, and there's the phone, and I'll look at it for, 10 minutes, but you see some of the stuff and it's like, oh no. And unfortunately, a lot of these guys are like, oh yeah, that's where I get my training, YouTube. And it's like, oh, and I think that has not helped.
Right.
Come on, my kid wants to go do squirrel flying. It's like, oh no, please, McKay. No. You go to skydive, that's one thing, but flying squirrel suits, that just looks. And you see what some of these guys are doing. It's like, no.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
But I don't think that that's helped in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. It's
Well, I think that like what social media has done for the training world is removed that filter of like time. And because like when I learned from you, Rip, you learned it from somebody, but there was time in there, and then I had to learn it from you, and I could ask you a question if I didn't understand it, and you could explain it to me. Where if I just watch a video on YouTube, I'm just taking my interpretation of it, and I'm running with it. And I think it exasperates what it's the Dunning-Kruger effect, how you get a certain amount of expertise and you think you're really good when you're not. Right. Because you don't have the experience, and the YouTube and the social media stuff is a big problem, because Dwayne and I have discussed this. When we go do a training course, there's always that silent partner in the room of the internet. So you'll give somebody a principle or something, and they're looking it up on their phone as you're talking, and then trying to prove you wrong. And it's sometimes it gets funny, sometimes it gets frustrating, but it is. I think, when I look back to where I learned my basic techniques and my basic skill set, it was like I had to learn it from a book, which are hard to write. Right. And, take it, and are difficult to produce, and you got to spend money to have them. Or I had to go to a training course or go to a climbing competition. I had to Now I think a lot of people are just sitting there, and don't get me wrong, there's plenty of good things on YouTube and social media. The problem is filtering it.
Absolutely.
And a lot of times things get taken out of context. Like it's possible to take a really good technique and use it poorly. You know, it's that these things can happen all the time. And it's just, so I always tell people, this is, you know, people ask me what it's like, well, never use social media, YouTube as a first point of reference, right? It's a great place. Like, oh, Rip showed me this cool technique. I'm going to check that out, see what the other guys are doing with it on YouTube, and then use it as a tertiary or a secondary point of reference, but never use it as a first point of reference, because how do you know? I don't know these guys, why they're posting on YouTube. I don't know. Oh. And there's a big difference between, hey, we were screwing around in the backyard drinking some beers, watch this. Or, hey, this is a really challenging job we had to do. This is how we solved our problem. And then the third level is that, well, this is how I would do it, and you should do it this way too. And those are very, very different conversations.
They are.
Yeah.
Some are appropriate for social media. Some are not.
What it seems to me is that there isn't, you know, I mean, let's face it, arborists are inventors, innovators. I don't think that's ever going to, particularly climbers, right? And, you know, a lot of the weird stuff we're talking about is guys that are up on rope, you know. You don't see guys post about, hey, check out what I do with my chipper, right? Like it's stuff in the air. And, you know, there's no one out there that I can see that's emphasizing R&D from what standard of practices are, you know, like, you know, a lot of what even some of the equipment and stuff we use, like going back to the Gibbs Ascender Rip, it wasn't made for that, right? Don Blair referenced how he was the first one to put the bolt through it so that guys couldn't mess with it, right? And so we've been doing that since time immemorial, making adaptations to things that weren't specifically designed. I think it's always going to be part of the industry, and I don't think it's a bad part. But what I'm worried with social these days, it's like people don't know the difference. It's like this is a cool thing that maybe one day might, you know, be referenced in the Z potentially, but right now it's an R&D black op. It isn't even. Like, you sure as hell shouldn't be using this on the job. It's just something that someone's inventing. But like the rope wrench, the micro pulley from CMI, they all started as innovations that now are considered and evolved into something that got tested, that got its credentialing. But, you know, you look at the first rope wrench, it certainly wasn't that. But look at it now, you know? Yeah. And where is that filter to differentiate? That's what I see is missing. There's no one making those calls out there.
Right. Well, especially on social media.
Yeah, on social media. Yeah. So how is these guys watching? How is there anybody to know to separate the toys box from the toolbox? You know, who's asking the C question? You know, that's what I feel is somewhat being lost, and why, you know, I brought C up earlier. That does it make your job safer? Does it make your job easier? And does it make it more efficient? And those are really unique distinctions. You know, I've always been fascinated how a lot of people argue that ease and efficiency are the same, but they're not. You know, there's a big difference there. And it just works really well. You know, that. Yeah. And you need a benchmark, right? And, you know, my understanding, Rip, you know, going back to, I asked you where the idea came from and so on, but like when it was taught to me from my time at Arbor Master with yourself and Ken, it was that you needed a criteria. We needed a way to look at new shit because everyone was bringing us new stuff. And I mean, I was there with you and Ken for a part of it. And, you know, people are bringing, hey, what do you think of this? What do you think? Like there wasn't the internet so much. They're just saying, so how do you evaluate something to you know, and that's what C was, right?
Exactly. And I believe still has a lot of validity, like you say, you know, but I think a lot of people are missing that.
Exactly.
You know, it's just like, wow, this is great. I got to have it.
Exactly.
Well, booyah. You know, I mean, you know, it's, because it's like, come on, there's a lot of gearheads in our group. Got to have one or more than one of everything. And it's like, okay, do you need this? And, you know, I mean, sometimes you got to spend a little time trying it. I mean, quite honestly, I've, you know, messed around with a few of these newer, you know, stationary rope devices. And I'm like, man, you know, it's nice, but I'm going to stick with this. Yep. You know, that's just going through my kind of basic thing. Not that it isn't cool and it isn't nice. It just, Same time, I'm not in any rush, so I don't need to burn through the tree, and I don't need,
Well, they don't need to either. They just don't see that yet.
They don't. But
well, and Rip, I guess the one last, I'll touch this. I don't want to. This, I don't think this is too sensitive, but like how much is the sales behind the machine of selling gear and equipment? Is there any responsibility there to be had in any of this?
Oh, I would say, yeah, I think so. I mean, come on. That's, unfortunately, and I'm probably a little guilty of this too. There's a lot of influential people have vested interest in selling something. Right. Yeah. They've been involved, whether they came up with it themselves or they are working with a company, and and that's there's I think there's responsibility there that, yes, it's nice to sell a product and make a little bit of money off it, but I think it's more important to make sure that, you're doing things in a responsible way. I don't know. I want to, again, you look at all these kids out there, you look at young people in the industry, and, it's like, I want you to still be able to climb when I'm, and you're my age or something. Exactly. So, you don't have to, take your time and do it safely and, spend that a little extra time because, I think that is a problem, Dwayne, that you bring up. Yeah. And I think some people lose sight of that, of their responsibility to, unfortunately, we're in a world where, and at least in our culture here in North America, it's a capitalistic society. People want to make money, and that's cool. But at what cost? I mean, I don't know. I think, you know what? I don't need to make a ton of money. I'm happy. I'm comfortable. Yeah. I'll never be super rich, but I believe, again, like we were talking about, I believe that I'm wealthy in the people I've met as friends who are lifelong friends, doing the work we do, just being able to go out and walk in the woods and, be amongst trees. Come on. I mean, like, right. You know how it is. Yep. We're out there. We are looking at trees in ways most people don't. Yep. And we see things and we're like, oh, you just like, man, trees are so cool.
It's a real gift.
They're so amazing what they do and can do. And, at the same time, we're a lot of our trees, they're struggling right these days. Yeah. And whether it's, drought, insects, disease, all the stuff, it's like, you hate to see it.
Yeah, there
is a responsibility.
Yeah, we are very fortunate,
and I think people lose sight of that fact.
Yeah, and we are very fortunate. I agree, and I'm lucky. I do, I think, and that's important too. Well, anyone that realizes that, like you have the space to, you take that second or that minute when you get up there and you look at the tree and you're, like Tony said, it's like. It's not like, how am I going to do this? It's like, I get to do this. It's right. Having that reverence or that appreciation and that gratitude to, I'm just grateful I can do it. Like I physically can do it. I can actually get up there. I've got friends now that did it that can't, physically can't for various reasons, what a great gift, and you make a good point, like to want to impart that to, that you're not so worn out or burned out that you can't do it anymore down the road is a true statement. And I think, in sincerity, that people understand that. Tony, you make the reference of something about like you the purpose of the stuff is to get you to do the work or something to that effect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm. I think so many newer climbers or people new into the industry, they get all wrapped up in the climbing part of it. They don't know. It's like climbing just gets you there to do the pruning, man. Like it's like driving. It's like working in a bank and saying your car is everything. It's like, no, the car just gets you to work, man. That's all it does, And the tools and equipment that I choose are the ones that help me get out there and do that work. That's my sole criteria for equipment selection is what helps me as a climber get to the end of that branch and make the cut I need to make safely and efficiently. And it's don't choose your ropes based on color. I miss the days when you could have a rope any color you wanted as long as it was white, because life was so much easier.
Right. Oh my gosh, I it just blows my mind how many different climbing lines there is. Like, really?
Yeah.
Holy
And it's,
cow.
and you know what? I'm a curmudgeon that way. I do applaud it. The options that are available to a new climber now, ops are absolutely awesome. But I think there's value in understanding the history of how it all started. Mm-hmm. And then, because, you know, you can't, how do you know where you're going if you don't know where you've been? So understanding the history and the culture of it. And then that will give you appreciation for, like, all of us have made plenty, like, people have fallen at the ITCC footlocking. Right. It happened, you know, and then we're playing a game, like, so if you understand that, then you can learn those lessons. Right.
Yeah. Right. Well, it is like, I remember hearing a friend tell me many years ago, you know, in life, we're going to have lots of experiences, some good, some not so good. The important thing is you like to learn the good ones on your own and learn the bad ones from someone else, right? You don't need to wait to become a statistic. It's like, believe me, other people, you know, we've seen this stuff. This is one of the reasons we are out here. I mean, and, you know, applause to you guys and the others who are out there doing what you're doing. You know, I don't do it so much anymore, but a little bit, but, you know, spending time with people to try to get them to work safer, to try to get them to think about that, to go home safely at the end of the day. Yeah. That's really the most important thing. Cause, you know, it's a lot of work doing the training, but, yeah, as I said, I mean, when people come up to you, you know, just a few kind words that, you know, what you did helped me and maybe saved me and, you know, has made an impact. It's like, well, that's the best. That's lots of money in a way, you know. It's like, you know, just the feeling that you changed somebody. You know, it's funny because, well, one guy I remember, because it was it was when we were in Nashville. So I don't even remember what year that was, 2008 or 6 or something like that. But, you know, I was the chair or whatever walking around the site. And I remember I ran into Tobe and he had a guy with him and the guy was wearing a ball cap and he took his ball cap off and he said, I just want you to know that you saved my life. And, you know, he had gone to one of those Cheryl, and I'll call him a gear, you know, event that we did years ago. And the guy had never worn a helmet, but having gone to that, he said, I went and I listened to you and I got a helmet and I started wearing it. And he had a big scar on his head and he had an accident up in the tree, you know, probably did something a little bit crazy, rigged something that came back on top of him, you know, whacked him in the head, broke his helmet. Wow. You know, he came down, ended up having to go to the hospital and, you know, he had to have brain surgery. He had a couple of broken blood vessels, but, you know, his brain surgeon basically told him, you know, you didn't have that helmet on, you're dead. Yep. And, you know, so something like that, it's like, man, you know, that's kind of why we do it. Yep. I think, you know, if you know, you made an impact on somebody, that's worth it all. Yeah. So that was, I always remember that guy, but, yeah.
I think
those are the best moments. And when you come back and hear that story, it's very rarely is it about a knot you showed me or something. Right. It's a core fundamental attitude that they picked up, and it's very, very rewarding, you know, that when somebody comes back to you, and it's phenomenal feeling.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. You know, I think, you know, it's where we're getting close to, we usually around an hour or a little more. And I think we're getting close to that time frame, Rip. And I think it's a real nice segue into wrapping it up. But, you know, it is I think all of us that have been involved in training and education at whatever level, whether you're the safety guy at a company or whether you're just, you train on, you know, you do tailboards for your crew or whether you travel around and train like you and I have and Tony has, there's those moments where people just say the simplest little things. And, you know, I'm really grateful for when people are that honest and vulnerable to say, you know, first of all, like when people are able to talk about what happened to them and admit what happened to them and it helps other people learn, and that sharing, you know, that is not everybody does that. I think a lot of people bury that stuff, you know, it's like some kind of dirty secret and, you know, I'd really, like I try to encourage people. That's why I started the tree confessions thing. There's so much, you said it, you learn from other people's misfortunes, right? Let's learn from you don't have enough time to make the mistakes yourselves, and all of them. You don't have time to make them all and they're too painful. You get your test before your lesson, right? And, and I applaud people that have the courage to say, look, this is what happened to me. And right at the start, Rip, you did that. You did that here in this podcast. And you didn't need to go into gory details, but you were honest about where you were at out there on the left coast, and you threw yourself a lifeline and you went with it, and here you are today. And you don't suppress or bury that part of it. And it would be fun one day to listen to you talk about your tours with the dead. But I appreciate that about you, Rip. I've always appreciated your sincerity. You're there's just what you see is what you get, and that's always been true for you, Rip, and I want to thank you for that and appreciate that. So, and I think everybody sees it. It's part of your charm and your success, and it's nothing succeeds like truth and honesty. It just does. So thanks for that example.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you guys again. It comes and goes both ways. And as I said, I've been a lucky guy. I honestly feel that the ability to meet a lot of the people and learn, different techniques and equipment, all that's part of it. But I think a lot, just the people we've met and being able to share. And again, know we have this brotherhood of, or tribe, of people who love what they do and, love working in trees because we realize how important trees are. And there's a lot of reward in that. Yeah. And I've been a lucky guy. Can hopefully, knock on wood, I can continue to be lucky. And as like you said, I am always still learning. I mean, I'm still using C on some of those new gizmos. I don't need to have Again, I'm not driving a Ferrari these days, but I'm going on a nice even pace and getting work done. And it's I just feel blessed that I've been able to it's weird how things have kind of come back around. And believe me, it's not that I didn't or don't love doing training, but it's just like I don't know. I love climbing trees so much that it's just this is a nice way for me to kind of maybe finish out my career, and I'll still be able to do a little training here and there, but I don't know. I've found a nice piece for myself, and being able to just go out and it's also interesting because I give a lot of credit to my early days at the Mass Arborist Association. I mean, again, really, that's kind of that's where I learned. I feel blessed to have learned to climb there. Some of the key things, was like, if you're not taking the tree down, you're not climbing with spikes. Right. So I learned to climb both ways. And I have to say that, in my travels, a lot of the tree care that's done in the greater Boston area, I think is some of the best. You hardly ever see topping and, just really not. And obviously there's plenty of guys out there who are doing things bad, but I was lucky that way. And it's, I got involved with Arbor Master and, ISA and all that. And I'm traveling and I kind of lost touch with the MAA for, a lot of time. I didn't get to go to Arbor Days. I just wasn't around. I was busy. And so it's been really nice to kind of come back full circle. And now I'm back. I'm volunteering for stuff with the ISA New England chapter and with the Mass Arborists again. And it's just great, seeing old friends and making new ones. And, so that's been a really nice thing too. And, so it's, cause I'd still go do some work in Metro West Boston, even though it's about a, 70-mile drive for me. I got people who want me to. And so I've got places I can stay up there. Nice. One of my good buddies, Matt Fody, he's like, oh yeah, stay at my house. He's like, he's traveling somewhere out in God knows where right now. He's like, oh, you can stay at my house when I'm not here. You know where the key is, it's like, which is cool, but it's just been nice to kind of reconnect with old friends and make new ones and, kind of again, kind of give back some more to MAA, because again, for me, that's where a lot of it started.
There's a saying, you can only keep what you have by giving it away. And I hear it repeated in what you're saying. And, you don't lose it when you give it away. You just, it creates more. And, it's, that the 1 + 1 is 3 concept, when we share and give back, it comes back to us. Well, it just makes more, and it's wonderful. And I'm reminded of it listening to you share this.
Yeah, no, it's well, it's been a great journey so far, and hopefully it'll continue on for a while longer. And I quite honestly, people say, "Are you retired?" Because of course, there's always buzz. I'm not doing much with Arbor Master, so people think you've quit it, or no, it's just changed a little my focus, and just doing something a little bit different most of the time, and
Good for you.
So I can't even fathom. People are like, "You're going to retire?" I'm like, "What the heck would I do with myself?" I don't even. I'll get to the point where I'm not climbing as much, but I'd like to do that as long as I'm physically able to. You kidding me? To be able to get up in a tree, come on! It's like there's nothing like it.
Yeah.
Even if it's just to go up there and sit there and enjoy a sunset, right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It's pretty.
Yeah, but I've always considered retirement is when you go to work because you want to, not because you have to anymore. Right?
Yeah.
I never intend stopping to work. I just now I think I guess I've been retired forever then, because but it does change a little bit. So
just going to share a little something that. No, I'm not going to now. No, it's all right. For another day.
Okay.
But,
Okay. Fair enough.
I'll share it at some point. It's just a kind of very cool thing that happened to me a year and a half ago, or that I did that I'll share. I haven't gotten permission from the person I did it for, but it was to share it. But it was,
that's a good segue, Rip, because when we there's been a couple people we've finished with, and there's more they'd like to say. They enjoyed the time, and it's turning into a bit of a legacy project, for a lot of us. I feel honored that people are willing to talk to us, and to get some of this audio down and recorded it's posterity. People are going to be able to listen to it, and we're already know that we're going to have do-overs or a mulligan with, and we're glad to have you on that list, and you can get that permission. We can go through that story. So I look forward to the next Tree Actions with Rip Tompkins, and I really have enjoyed this one, and we just want to thank you for your candor, your honesty, and your openness. Like it's just really, truth is strong, and you're very strong, Rip. So thank you.
Well, thank you guys.
Rip,
I appreciate it.
I
look forward to, I got to figure out how to listen to some of these. I'm not obviously the most technologically.
We'll get them to you. We'll get them to you one way or the other.
That's cool. Well, I appreciate it, and it's good seeing and talking to both of you. And